Ho, 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 hey, ho. 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 Ho, 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 hey. Joch Samish Joch Quong Elasam Josh Walletsam Sambarts on us na ta Uchayam Seathlan ta Seathlan at ta Skalangoch Cheesungs ta Uchacha Stalngoch Uchietsan ta Seathlan Hartga at ta Spelchen.
Hi, Sam.
Hello, Greg. How are you?
It's amazing to see you on Vendovi Island on this beautiful spring day. I have to tell you, my spine is tingling hearing that song and those words you were just saying. Can you tell me what you were singing and talking about, please?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. That is a traditional cleansing song. It's a song that came to me, and so I share it openly with you here today. And I sing that song before I harvest plant medicines and foods such as camas, and such a song I used to open up work like this. And the prayer that I said was in the lhxen and Samish language, and essentially is what I said was that this here is a prairie, spalchen, that's the word for prairie, spalchen, and that this used to be a place where our people, our lhxen people, would come to gather food and medicine that we would be able to feed ourselves all year long with, and that there's a lot of medicine here, and just acknowledging the ancestors and the old people that used to steward these places.
Wow, that's amazing. That's well, can you tell me more about the cultural significance of a place like this and how it fit into your ancestors' way of life?
Yeah, so this is, like I said, a spalchen. It had a really special word for it in our language. It's a place that generally means prairie, but it houses all these different plants in its ecosystem. And what might look wild or overgrown to just any person who happens to be hiking along through here, it's actually a living remnant of a garden that was very thoughtfully stewarded by the old ones, by the ancestors for thousands and thousands of years. There's a few plants that grow together really, really nicely in these prairies, and they all happen to be fire-adapted species as well. And so the management technique that people would use to manage these prairies would actually promote a few key species that people really, really relied on for their winter food sources. Camas, which we call quishal, and the chocolate lily, it's alik, and then the Gary oak, which is jungilch. And each one of those plants could be cooked and processed in a way that we could preserve them for the whole winter, and also preserve them long enough to be able to trade with neighboring villages.
Well, what part of the camas and other plants, they don't have acorns, what part of the plant was harvested for food?
Yeah, so the camas would be dug up. So at the base of the plant, below the flower, is this little bulb right here. And this bulb is full of inulin, is the type of carbohydrate that it is. And when you cook it down for 24 to 36 hours in an earth oven, a big steam pit, it actually turns into this caramelized, really rich, something between a potato and it's really hard to describe. It's kind of like a potato, but it tastes like this smoky, earthy caramel. And you can see it's quite small, which is indicative that this is an untended prairie. And from oral histories, we know that really high quality camas beds that were well maintained by people who had the knowledge, sometimes these bulbs would get almost as big as a golf ball or a baseball. And so this is just evidence that these flowers here are suffering, and they miss the love of the people that once cared for them.
Will the root get larger towards the fall?
It might get a little bit larger towards the fall, and typically the harvest schedule is to harvest in the fall after the energy has all traveled back down into the root bulb when the seeds are formed. And so the traditional cycle of harvest is actually to wait for the seeds to finish out, dig it, and then dig the bulb, and then place the seeds in the ground at the same time. And then at that time, after the rains have started, you'd be able to do your broadcast burns and have them not get to a high intensity, because you would want that burn to move through the landscape. Just not too hot, because you wouldn't want it to toast those seeds. But you can imagine that it would require really regular maintenance, annual or biannual maintenance. And this has been let go for 150 years since colonization.
Yeah, I know that there was more of this undergrowth when the Preservation Trust first acquired this property in 2010, and some of it's been removed by work crews trying to restore the meadow a little bit closer to what it might have been like in those days. But as you say, there's no way without the constant tending and maintenance that it could actually look like it did then, right?
Right, yeah, and that's great that there is some maintenance going on. But it really was a whole life cycle built around these plants, because these fires would also feed into the nearshore environment on the beaches. And there's a lot of thought that those nutrients that would come from those burns would actually promote the clam growth and the clam gardens that would be typically near these prairies as well. So people would have a camp where they would be harvesting the camas and the chocolate lilies and the Gary oak acorns, and it would be near the water where you'd be also harvesting the clams. And it was this cyclical management cycle and stuff. And people would be steaming the clams and the camas all together and drying them and preparing for winter together.
Amazing. I should add perhaps that normally we don't encourage the harvest of wildflowers, but we have special dispensation since you're here joining us to do that today, and thank you. Can you tell me, you mentioned some other flowers, like the chocolate lily, is that similar to the camas?
The chocolate lily is very interesting. It is called rice root, and instead of one bulb, there's like hundreds of tiny little bulbs under the base of one stem, and very similar to rice. And that's one that people could actually eat raw just as is, or dry them and rehydrate them later.
So really, mostly all these islands that we can see from here might have been similar harvest grounds for this kind of food source?
Yes, for this food source and many others. Place names in Coast Salish culture often have to do with the major resource that was harvested from that area. For example, Lopez Island is called lhxen, which means reef net on the bottom, and that refers to Iceberg Point being a major reef net.
That's amazing. Huh. Can you tell me a few of the other names?
Yeah, so the name of Guimas Island is called Guancongela, and that relates to the word for dog, and so it literally means a bunch of little dogs running around, because that's where we would keep our herds of woolly dogs. The wool dogs were kept separate from the hunting dogs because we wanted to preserve those pure white coats, because then you could dye it any color you want. And a pure white coat showed that dog came from a family that knew how to breed the dogs.
That's interesting, because that's one place name that I think is preserved today. I know that residents of Guimas often refer to it as Dog Island, right?
That's right.
And in fact, that's your home, right? You came here today from Guimas with your daughter and your wife?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, my daughter's name is Saliia, and I'm really excited to be passing these traditions on to her, and she loves picking flowers, so she'll be good at digging camas eventually.
Wow, I've learned so much. Thanks, Sam. How do you say see you later in Lekwungen?
Lhxen.
Haikwacha.
That's perfect. Yep.
All right.
And then to say back, I say hayok.
All right, we'll try it. Haikwacha.
Hayok.
Thanks, Sam.
Ho, ho, ho,